Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 135. I am back this week. We have all three hosts with us today, and we also are joined by a fantastic guest as well, who I will introduce you to in a minute. But first of all, just as I've missed a week, just how are we doing, Mr. Peter Lant?
I'm doing very well. I'm still feeling all right, despite the fact that you and our guest have just been talking about snowboarding and how great it is and all of that, because you both just got back from doing that. So I'm not jealous at all or anything. And I'm also feeling a little bit underdressed. I know you're wearing a hoodie, but Paul's come dressed as like Clint Eastwood or something.
I was going to say Bono.
I was going with status quo.
Have you got denim underpants on as well? Is that what it is?
Yeah, double denim.
Status quo were like all denim, weren't they? Like proper denim.
I've got a nice mullet as well. Can't see it. I've just tied it.
You can't see it, you know? Yeah. All right. Is it a bit like what's it? Coming to America, where he's like the princess thing at the back.
That's exactly a rat tail.
Okay, and we've already heard from him, Mr. Paul Bassett. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I've made a bet that we're going to have T-shirt weather at the end of March, which this podcast should be going out about that time. So hopefully I'll be proved correct.
It depends where you're from, doesn't it?
Well,
it's already
from
T-shirt
London.
weather, mate. It's already T-shirt weather where I'm from.
Yeah, it's not bad actually. It's
Crop
actually it's very, very mild today here in Essex, and we have Pete in Bath, we have Paul in London, and we have our guest as well, I believe, in London as well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we are joined today by Suzanne Keatley. How are you doing, Suzanne?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. No, it's excellent to have you with us. So just very quickly before I pass over to Suzanne, I've been put in touch with Suzanne via former guest, friend of the show, and one of my coaches and mentors, Chet Majaria. So he is a mutual kind of friend and acquaintance of both of us, and I've been connected with Suzanne for a while on social media, but we've not actually met in person or had a kind of an in-depth conversation. So that's going to be really good today. Suzanne is based in London, like I said, and she is the owner of Fitology Hub, which is we'll get into more detail as we kind of talk, but it's a female-only fitness hub, strength and conditioning classes, so semi-private training and personal training in London, and also the host of the Reclaiming Yourself podcast. So Suzanne, how are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. That was a very nice introduction.
Okay, we've been doing this a little while now, so we can kind of we're learning as we go. We get a little bit better each week. That's
an impressive amount of episodes, James.
Well, we're motoring towards. We're hoping we're going to make. Well, when will we hit 150? In about 4 months' time, probably. We'll hit 150, which will be a good little another little landmark.
So 3 years.
That will be about 3 years, 150 episodes. Yeah. So yeah, that'll be very, very good. So Suzanne, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of yourself? Obviously, I've kind of given the broad brushstroke there of what you do, but what I always find really interesting, and I know from speaking to our listeners, it's kind of the background story. I kind of, because I'm a bit of a comic book geek, I call it the origin story, kind of where you've come from, how you got into this type of work, why you do what you do, how you do what you do, a bit about the business and all that kind of thing. And then we can maybe just kind of delve into some bits in more detail and ask questions as we go, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
I should have my script ready, but I don't. I'm good doing this off the
off the cuff is the best way.
Yeah, so I guess with the accent, for some people, I guess it's obvious I'm from Ireland, but Southern Ireland, south of Dublin. And I grew up on a farm, big family, kind of typical story. I was the middle child, so I was the last one. So very into sport as a kid, loved my kind of games, and there was a lot of it around as well. My school was really good, and our local camogie club, which is a little bit hurling, little kind of cross between lacrosse and hockey. So I grew up playing that, and then actually I left Ireland to come to Brighton University to study to be a PE teacher. And did that for 4 years, lived in Eastbourne because that's where the campus was for the course, and then came to London because there's no Irish people in Eastbourne, and I, to be honest, felt a bit lost, and like on reflection 20 odd years later, quite a traumatic thing, I think, to get on a plane as a 19-20-year-old to come over and get stuck into university. And I think there was at the time one other Irish person, which was a big deal at the time. I mean, less so now. But yeah, and then I came to then finish uni, came to London to work, and then was able to play that sport camogie over here as well. So had a really good community, had lots of fun, and started teaching.
So was that, just quickly, was that a camogie team based in London, was it?
Yeah, there's quite a few, in fact. There's a few. There's North London, there's Croydon, I was Croydon, and then there's one in Birmingham. So we had a proper league over here, and then sometimes flew over and back to Ireland to play as well, which was really cool. Or if you won the league here, you flew over there to get trashed by an Irish team.
And were your teammates mainly, is it mainly kind of people from Ireland playing the game in London? It's kind of a way of everyone congregating and stuff.
Exactly that. Or people that have grown up over here, but with a really strong, like both parents are Irish, and there's a lot of Irish connections. It was good. It was good times.
Okay.
Times. I think we even went out to Dubai one time there was a whole like festival for a week to play the sport over there. So we got like the amount of opportunities and events and people we met. It was really incredible. Very
I can imagine that a bunch of Irish people in Dubai just go like,
oh my God,
does the sunshine look
yeah, there's a lot of factor 50, Peter. Needless to say, the chaos that also comes with that, right? It's good fun. And then I had to kind of get a bit more sensible because I couldn't spend every weekend drinking and just playing sport. So and also just the game itself is it's not supposed to be a contact sport, but it's a contact sport. So I had to kind of remove myself from that, which ended up being like I had to get out into the world and learn about other people basically. But also I was teaching in a mixed school at that time in like Eltham in southeast London, and then moved to Hackney to teach, and I was in Hackney teaching in a girls' school, which is relevant to the business now. But teaching in a girls' school for about 7 or 8 years, head of PE, kind of going down the assistant head route, deputy head route. So and I guess the relevance of that now is that it was all back then, it was all about getting girls to just find the sport or the physical activity that they enjoy, and getting them to understand that dance is very different from a game, it's very different from athletics, and you don't have to like all of those things. You got to find the thing that you enjoy, and hopefully something that you can pick up or continue with or pick up later on in life. So it was all about participation then, I think. And then I left teaching and thought, what am I going to do? And then I knew I could train people. So I knew that was a skill I had. So I started that. I took 3 months off teaching and working, did a little bit of traveling, and then, got into a park and just started with a person who's a good friend of mine now, Olivia. And we started in 5 o'clock in the morning in the freezing cold, as I guess everybody here will probably relate to at some point. And just built up from there, and then managed to get a few clients, opened a space. In that time I found strength training. In fact, I found CrossFit. I started doing CrossFit, and so was able to kind of find my love for that at the same time as I guess coaching and teaching other people in the kind of strength elements and the gymnastics elements of that.
What was the you know, don't need to go into a lot of detail about it, but what was when you got into teaching, I presume that was kind of what you thought was going to be your kind of career path and things, and then what kind of made you decide to stop that and to you know, take a different route, although with a similar, you know, you were PE teaching and, you know, sport and things, so you kind of have kept with that broad theme but now moved in a different direction. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I think if anybody has a friend who's a teacher of any sort, they'll know
my girlfriend's a teacher.
Okay. So Peter, you'll know the amount of hours and the amount of commitment and the expectations, the accountability, the you know, in the period that I was working, I went from working in a school where we were just all digging in to like help young people. It was, you know, to empower young people. And then it just grew into just a very political environment. And yeah, just for me, I was like, I can't measure that half an hour conversation that I've had with a child who needed my support on that morning. And yeah, I just think I wanted a life, like I wanted to have flexibility. I'd met my partner and it was a bit like, well, I can't live with somebody who works every evening, every weekend. And yeah, so I think it was about opening up my world a little bit, I suppose, to see what else was out there.
I've got a question, actually. Well, number one, I learned, so I've been with Sean like, 7 years this year, I think. And I learned very quickly that you don't go, but you get 6 weeks off. And that doesn't help. 6 weeks off in the summer, that's fine. Doesn't matter if you're working weekends and that, what are you talking about? It doesn't help. So I've changed my view on that massively. But anyway, I'd be interested to know, like you said, you're doing the like a PE teacher with girls, and then you were saying, so this might feed through into what you do now, because I know like strength and conditioning has got like a stigma to it for certainly for women, and I think that's like a myth that's being bust now, but by people like you, but it's taken time. So you were saying the girls could pick whichever sport they wanted, and go from there. And what was the outcome of that? What did most of them pick a certain type of sport, or was there like a massive cross section? Like, what was the?
Yeah,
and I know, like I know in a school it can probably be like, you know, a bit of peer pressure, and so my friend's doing that, so I'll go and do it as well. So it might not be a good cross section of society sort of thing, but it would just be interesting to know, I think.
Yeah, I think it was a girls' school, and so what that allowed the girls to do was to be girls for longer than they would if they were in a mixed school. As much as when you're in teaching in a mixed school, you try and protect that. But there is something about girls being allowed to be girls for as long as possible. But when I arrived, also the school was like a lot of kids were still in plimsolls. 50% of children didn't bother with their PE, so it was pretty much the PE was struggling, and it was kind of my job to, you know, make it a bit more professional. And just take it. I went down that route of enjoyment. And so although they still had to do, as a teacher, you know, the curriculum, you have to tick that box and that, and then you have to do the kind of range, but it was more about listening to them and them explaining all the barriers to exercise, which now we're starting to talk about, right, and starting to understand. We were about 55-60% Muslim girls as well. So the barriers then that they had was really, I mean, they go deep into societal stuff, and it's trying to get to the bottom of that, but also to just really provide safe spaces where they could open up and be themselves. And so, yeah, like if we were doing dance, which I had to do an element of that, there's some of the children that would absolutely love it, like trampolining or like a game. But then, you know, some of them would end up being photographers and being a leader in a different kind of setting. So not making them do anything, but finding the thing that allowed them to access that activity, basically. Yeah.
And when you, so then when you kind of decided to leave, and then you moved into kind of, I think you said you started doing sort of training with people in a park or something. What was, and then you yourself was it you yourself got into CrossFit training? That was your kind of way into kind of strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
But when you started doing your training, you were training other people in a park or whatever. Were you doing, was it like a boot camp sort of scenario? Was it more like one-to-one training, but you were using a park? Or yeah, what did that kind of look like to begin with?
Yeah, so that it was one-to-one. And actually prior to CrossFit, I was training with a personal trainer. And we did a lot at the time, did a lot of triathlons and half Ironmans and events like that, which were fun, but I'm not sure I ever really enjoyed them. I forced myself to get on a bike, I forced myself into the water. But of course, all these things, they're always brilliant once you've done them, right? Because they are the challenge, you know, and every session was challenging. And so I always felt great after it. But I think the CrossFit space that I ended up in was, I just think maybe the programming was very clever. There was a lot of understanding around, actually, before you do CrossFit stuff, you've got to do this years of base work to be able to have your body in a fit state to be able to then do the more advanced work around CrossFit. And I think that's what I was inspired by, that level of like, actually, we've got to, do the thing you enjoy. But there's, you know, there could be what, 20, 25 years of like inactivity to then like rebuild the body to get to a point where then you can be explosive and you can run or jump or whatever those movements are.
But talking about movement, I mean, one of the thing about maybe you'll know extremely well, you know, in the school system, they tends to be an emphasis more on sport rather than movement. I mean, there's movement within sport, but there isn't a kind of physical how is it physical education versus sports education? Has that evolved? Is that something you tried to bring in? So, because I mean, obviously I deal with a lot of adults who just have no movement skill at all because they've just never been taught even the basic squat or anything like that. You know, they've just forgotten, you know, they obviously had it as a child, but they've forgotten. Is that something you were able to do or instill in people?
I think I think it's something that is changing in schools now. I think back then, around the time I was finishing, a lot of schools were bringing in gym facilities, and strength was starting to be talked about. So there might be some kettlebells in comparison to, you know, I guess 10 years before, or a lot of the experiences that we'll hear of adults now, where it was based on competition. And if you were good at it, you were included. And if you weren't good at it, you were excluded. And yeah, there was a lot of work around. And I think that's where I came at it, which was actually, if we can increase participation through enjoyment, then as you kind of alluded to it there, kids know how to move. We know how to move as children in our bodies. And somehow we unravel that and undo that as the years go by. So, and maybe that's the assumption as well. And maybe it's a proper assumption. So when you're in a primary school with children, they know how to move. And then there's a lot of, feels like in the past, at least, there's a lot of damage done in that secondary school setting.
So it seems that like, oh, sorry, so go on.
I was just going to say, it's funny because my recollection of primary school is doing it in my vest and underpants when I'd forgot my kit. I'm that old. You wouldn't do that now, but blimey, it was like, you've forgotten your kit. Oh, well, just do it in your vest and Y fronts, and then you'd be like in the school hall in front of everyone, but didn't care. Bonkers. Anyway, sorry, Paul. And
Peter, you expressed that you didn't care. Can you imagine, like, if you did care and that was happening, and that kind of stuff was happening, wasn't it? A lot.
Yes. Yeah. There'd be people who, there'd be kids who are like, it's not for me, but they make you do it anyway. Yeah. Things have changed, fortunately.
It's a little bit like when we were talking to Brett Jones the other week, when people have, and I know we're going to move into this because I think it was quite, you know, the whole idea of sort of participation and enjoyment is kind of the route you have to go down when dealing with adults, isn't it? Because most adults don't want to get involved in a competitive sport or competitive element. They want to improve their health and improve their confidence and improve lots of things like that. But Brett was saying when we had him on that a lot of people have this negative association or connotation to fitness or sport, and I know I deal with mainly people over 50 that the people get put off of physical activity for life because of bad experiences in PE at school. You know, like you say, and if you're made to run around a sports hall in your pants and it's the last thing you want to do and you get bullied and all the rest of it, it's enough to put you off for life. So sorry, went off on a little bit.
Didn't make him do it. He did it off his own back.
I used to forget me kit on purpose. No.
So Paul, I jumped in when you said how so, and Suzanne was about to answer your question.
Was I?
Can you remember what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think
what happens in secondary school that
yes, that was it.
Their love.
Yeah, and I guess part of it, Paul, that's already there is that people are moving from children to teenagers, and so that internal battle around even the physical body. So for a young girl to suddenly have breasts and then be expected to just run in front of boys, like, it's mortifying, it's horrifying, it's everything Peter's just said, but with the, you know, with like a big, I don't know, crown on your head saying, look at me. And I guess that's just one example, but I think it's part of that, isn't it? It's part of the deeper feeling around how children are feeling in terms of the movement stuff, and then the perceptions. And I guess then maybe we close down, so we don't want to jump and we don't want to squat, maybe.
Is it? I mean, obviously society's become more sedentary. You know, we rely more on devices and computers and phones. You know, I mean, a lot of the stuff I have is anecdotal. I mean, I know a lot of trainers, and some of them have talked about going into schools, and some of them have been doing it for many years and being surprised at the lack of mobility and the lack of movement skill and things that they thought would they, you know, be able to do very easily. A lot of the kids couldn't even fathom and couldn't even do. Did that change? Were things getting, you know, were kids being able to keep up, or, you know, because it's one of those things where, you know, you've got to do it. And one of the things we work with on adults is like, this is going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, movement is kind of uncomfortable, just like maths is uncomfortable for your brain. You know, it's like, in order to get good at it, you kind of have to do it. But I remember there was never really a, you know, when you go to sixth form, there's like a pass and a fail, isn't there? You get an A, B, C, D, whatever. You know, there's standards to get into university. There's never any physical standards, is there? It's not like a pass or a fail. So it's difficult to know what's at stake in a way, isn't it? You know, we're told that our entire career in life's at stake when we do GCSEs, you know, so there's that pressure, but there isn't really with movement or physicality, is there?
No, and I think that's where we're talking about change. And I guess that's where the change comes about, where it is taken at that level at one step at a time. So I don't like, we used to just expect teenage girls, frozen.
You're okay. We can hear you.
So there, great.
Yeah.
Expect teenage girls to go out and do a Cooper test. Is it Cooper test where you run? What's that? When you run for like 12 minutes to test and like test your cardiovascular fitness. I mean, what a disaster. Like, why were we doing that? You know, it was ridiculous. And if you ever ask, even, I mean, I've got a 5-year-old boy, and he'll run for 20 meters and then he'll need to stop and sit down just because, but he won't walk, you know. So it's, I think it's what's at stake, but also then, even when was that? That was 2000. How long am I out of it? 10 years ago. It's different from what it is now, right? The technology, as you said, has progressed so much since that, and the level of inactivity from
in the last decade. Yeah, definitely.
But in a way, your role as a PE teacher was so relevant because, you know, kids sitting down all day, their brains switch off. I mean, my brain switches off if I don't go and walk around the studio, swing a weight, or just kind of do something, you know. And I definitely know, I've got 2 young kids, you know, how active they are and how switched on their brains are when they're moving versus when they're just sat down trying to soak information in. They just don't operate like that. And I always think that PE is almost, I mean, I've lost track about when they do PE at school, in my own school. I mean, we do a few after school clubs, but they love it. They love moving, you know, and it's like the role of that physical education is, I think, is one of the most important things in the school, because but it's never valued, is it?
It's never valued. It's being pulled. There's less money going into it. When I know when I left, they'd stopped the second years from going swimming, but for every week we brought the first years and the second years swimming week on week. And you know, I think it's that valued. The maths, English and science when you're in school are the most important subjects, and the arts and PE and sport is put down.
I know that if you weren't running around playing a rugby match or doing something, some of the boys wouldn't know what to do with themselves and end up getting into fights and stuff like that. And you know, it just takes, and you know, there's no team bonding, there's no kind of shared experience. It's just all. I just think I don't know how I don't think it's really valued in wider culture until we suddenly get CEOs or managing directors or heads of department whose bodies are failing, and then we all now clear up the consequences of that 20, 30 years later, you know.
There's a book called the Well-Balanced Child. I don't know if you've read it. It's really good. And it was recommended to me by Tim Anderson, Original Strength, and it's where he got one of his, that's where Original Strength started from that, and the brain that changes itself, I think he said the book was as well. But that is about, it's got an example in it of a lady who goes into a school in the States, I think it's in the States, and basically the kids can't hold their heads up properly. You know, when kids lie their head on the desk and they're writing, so they're doing that, the handwriting is sloppy. They get them to draw a picture, like of whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. I can't remember what, they just get them to draw a picture, and the pictures are like, some are good, some aren't so good, and what have you. And then they do like a 6-week movement program based on, rocking, rolling, crawling, all those sorts of things, building strength from the ground up. I think it's like primary school kids. And then they test them all again, like 6 weeks later, and they've got better concentration. They can sit upright in their chairs when they're writing. The handwriting's got better. They're more alert. They're drawing another picture again, and it just looks better. Or it's, there's more imagination in it and stuff like that. So it actually, obviously the physical body and the mental and the brain, the mental body and the brain work together, don't they? So you become more focused, the more, basically the stronger you are and the more you can move and stuff like that as well. It's a really good book, actually. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
So
and I think schools know that, right? They know this stuff, but their hands are tied as well.
I think that's it.
What they have to do, what they have to fit in a day, how much money they put where. If they're accountable to the numbers above them, they then have to, meet those for the students, and the students have to meet them. So yeah,
it's a bit like Jamie's dinners, where they tried his best to get the food in there, but then the parents are feeding like chips through the school railings and everything. There's a lot of things that conspire against these best efforts, isn't there? Yeah. It's the money, it's the time, it's the political will. All these things kind of get in the way of things that might actually, in the long term, which is difficult to measure, have the best outcome for the child.
Mm. Yeah.
So, Suzanne, if we move from if you can kind of talk to us maybe a little bit about, we got to the, you're doing your training in the park. Where did, Fitology Hub come from, or what was the genesis of that? What was the thinking behind that, and how did you move from being someone doing personal training in a park to actually then wanting to have a facility, having a facility? What was the ethos of the facility and all of that? How did that come about?
Yeah, I knew that I didn't want to be in a park, and I knew I didn't want to be in a gym. And so I was hitting my late 30s at that point as well. And I was like, I'm going to make a successful business out of this, or at that point was like, I don't know what else to do. So I found a facility in Brockley, which is just a couple of miles from where I live. And I'd already had a handful of clients. It was a very small 300 square foot space where I knew I could run personal training sessions from, and just build up my client base from there. Seems very easy, it all seems very easy when I talk about it now. Build up a client base, create a brand. I went for the brand really early on. And I guess part of that, and I know Peter, we alluded to it earlier as well, this idea of like, I'm, I suppose, a bit of an introvert. I'm learning, and I hid behind that brand. So the brand was the opportunity for me to kind of hide behind it as a business owner, I suppose, and probably feeling like a complete imposter, thinking, how on earth, I'm not like other fitness trainers. And so what am I doing in the space? But I just had to kind of get my head down and keep moving forward and just try and find the right people that I could work with. And we weren't women only straight away, but it meant as I, a year or two into it, I was like, I'm not enjoying working with men. It's really a different experience to work with women. And so I just went down the women's route, and from there just kept digging away at what that actually meant and means, and how to then kind of build the business, maybe without even knowing it, from a kind of values perspective, rather than that kind of fitness. I'm doing this specific type of fitness and everybody needs to do it this particular way. And I was finding, as I said, finding strength training at that time, and very quickly realized I just wanted more women to experience strength training. And so got a bigger space, over 2 floors in the same kind of business unit. And in that time I'd got married. So I was like, I need to go away for 4 weeks. How am I going to how's the business going to run without me? And so I got some excellent coaches on board. So they kind of carried on the sessions. And that's been a bit of a tool almost to build the business, is me stepping away from it. Because I had my son and I was like, how am I going to run the business and have a brand new baby? And Chet, who you mentioned at the beginning, has been a very strong, solid mentor of mine since, well, how many years? 6-7 years now. And he was very much part of helping me manage that and do that and create that. And so, yeah.
So the name, has it always been Fitology Hub since the start? That's always, so that was the brand that you came up with right at the start, and it's always how did you come up with that? What was the thinking behind that? How did that come about?
I just sat down for a whole day and went, what is nobody else using? Like the ology part. The ology part was very kind of linked to the science and the education the education side of things that I just come from. And so that made sense. The hub bit was about trying to create a community of like-minded people. And I kind of guess it came together, and also was able to find, what is it when you want to buy the website name? And
to get the domain and all that sort of thing.
And it was linked to that as well. How could I get the domain? And I was able to get that. And it's stuck, and the brand, like, it's exactly as it was when we created it that back then.
What was the challenge with training guys? Because I mean, I have majority of my clients are women. Sorry. What was it that turned you to focus on women as the main kind of core of your business?
It's gonna sound really silly, Paul, but it's stuff like, when, I don't know if you noticed this, but when women put down equipment, they place down equipment, or they'll put it back where they got it. Whereas I had men at the time who'd be like, well, they'll throw the piece of equipment down, then there'll be a hole in the floor. At the time, and there wasn't very many, so it was still probably 80-20. And so it was more of a decision about where it was more of that. I don't like, at that time, it was about how do I niche? Because I think at the beginning I was like, I need to train everybody. But as I grew the business, it was about how we make niche, basically. And so that was part of that decision. But also for me, it just did feel different. It felt, I enjoy coaching, form, technique, plucking things apart, like taking things apart, rebuilding it, and figuring movement out with my clients. And I found that easier to do at the time with women than I did with men.
It is true that I find that, well, there is a mixture of men. I mean, I frequently have this conversation on the podcast that it's difficult to keep a lot of the male clients focused for a long period of time, because they just want to go and do it themselves. And they don't always take coaching well. When you get a male client who does take coaching well, they accelerate so fast, but often they just want to do it themselves, and they see things quite short term. So it can be quite frustrating as a coach, I think. You got to get your mind up for it.
And I think
I had a guy the other night, and he was scraping. He was got a concrete floor, and it was a parallel. He was doing some like renegade rows, and he was moving the this is one thing, right, that gets right on my nerves. When you do renegade rows on a parallel, right, they'll pull the kettlebell and then move the kettlebell. to the other side. It's like, move the parallel. It weighs like a tenth of the kettlebell, but he was scraping the kettlebell underneath it. And I was like, can you stop doing that? You're pulling all the coating off and everything. Anyway,
And
what I'm interested in is what you said, I think it was before we started recording, about how you work with the women who you train. And it's obviously training, like strength training and like physical training, but you said you work with them on the emotional side as well. So it's like the whole package, which I think will, like, you know, it'll be one of the things that sets you apart from a lot of trainers who just think, like, you know, oh, get yourself fit and strong and it'll sort your life out. And it's like, well, that's like one element, isn't it? It's a great thing to do, but it doesn't, you know, it's not a panacea for everything. So, yeah, I'm just really interested in how you work with people to like with the whole kind of, what would you call it? The holistic approach.
Yeah. And I think our holistic approach starts with even just how we talk on Instagram. Like on my Instagram, it's rare you'll see people actually lifting really heavy weight. We're dealing with general public, like you said, and there is a small percent of the population who will take it and run with it and be exceptional and compete and head down that kind of route. Whereas the people that we're working with, like, they're coming in for a 45-minute consultation. They might not have entered or stepped foot in a gym in 20 years, or just never at all, or have and absolutely hated it because they found the environment just horrendous. They might have tried maybe a few different things in their life, but never stuck to anything and never really enjoyed any form of exercise. And so the conversation with them is about, like, this is how we've created the space. You've got your own pod, you've got your own space. There's nobody in front of you. There's nobody behind you. It's you and the trainer and the other people in the room. They're part of the session, but it's not, when we talk about community, we're talking about like a community again of introverts. I think I've built a business around introverted people where we've almost protecting their space and protecting what they're hearing. We do a lot of work around, if I'm having a conversation here, how does it impact the person at the end of the room? And the language we use.
If every gym was like that, that would be great.
Yeah, we have got a bit of work to do. We've got, like even just using words like, I mean, we've dug into the language and we've literally said, right, we're not going to use this word. We're not going to use this word. Like stuff like banter. It's like, okay, well, I might be having a banter with somebody here, but again, what's the impact on the other people around me? So yeah, just going back to the consults, that they are the conversations. It's about, like, we talk more about what the environment does for the person and how, you know, we start with sticks, we start with bands. Women want to learn form and technique. They want to know they're doing it really well. And then that's quite often the basis of building confidence. So we talk about how we do that. We talk about how everything in a session is scaled. So you might come in, like, we all go through our monthly cycles as women. So you come in on 1 week and you'll be like crawling through the door, and we use scaling option of 1 to 10. And we say, you come in, you might be feeling 3 out of 10 on that day, but you'll be accepted on that day, and you will be allowed to just, you know, verbalize that and then have the session meet your needs. There'll be other days where you'll be bouncing off the walls and feeling like you want to be challenged. But in all of that challenge, it's more about dipping into that kind of intrinsic motivation, finding, like, getting them to find what makes them want to move rather than be the person to tell them to do the thing. And that, like, psychology about coming out of comfort zones, which I think men naturally do, right? We have, like, they like getting out of their comfort zone and being uncomfortable and just going hell for leather, whereas women don't like doing that unless they are in control of that. And so we will do that, but in snippets. Right, now you're going to go, but you choose.
I love that, because I do that. I mean, I train mainly blokes, and you're right, yeah, bloke. I think that's bravado that blokes like getting out of the comfort zone. I think they like to say that they do, but they don't. That's my experience of it.
Yeah,
anyway.
I've got plenty. I've got
day.
some that you have to kind of coax out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, but what I do like is I always ask them when they turn up in the morning, how are you feeling? How's it going? You know,
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't slept very well. And we're in a group, but like one might not have slept very well. It's like, right, you're going to like have a go. see how it goes. Oh, that's a bit heavy today, right? Let's just dial it back. And I love that. Like you say, the people come in, and it's not just necessarily with the cycle, is it? It's with, like, you know, if the kids have had exams or something like that, or whatever, like some sort of stress, or you're busy at work or whatever. But what I love about that approach is it's like, come anyway. It doesn't matter what you feel like, unless you're like, you know, you're really in bed or something like that. Come anyway, because you'll be able to do something, even if you just do some stretching in the corner. You've got out of the house, you've got away from the family and kids, and this is your time. And I absolutely love that. And then on days that you are feeling like, you know, like the Duracell bunny, it's like, right, let's have a go at something and see what you're capable of. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and Peter, usually when they come in feeling terrible, the movement just naturally picks itself up, doesn't it? And people improve, you know, they start to feel the feels or whatever. But yeah, we've built, so again, going back to like building this space for women, like what you've described there, is that kind of having that structure and sustainability element. So we want you to sustain this thing in the long term. And if you're feeling like you're going to be hammered, then it's just not sustainable over time, because, you know, life happens. You'll be on, and we know this, right? They'll be on a nice run, and then something will happen where they'll plummet again. And it's like, how do I just get myself through the door? When that happens, most of our members are women in their 40s, 50s and beyond. So then you're dealing with, the kind of family life, working stress. We know everybody is like beyond stress these days. So it's how do we take down the stress levels? And then menopause, we're dealing a lot with that as well. So it's really important that what you just like described back is the kind of the guts of it, really. Yeah.
And so what do you do in terms of the actual kind of mechanics of the studio that you have now? Are you still in your, I dropped out my, for some reason I dropped out and I come back in. Hopefully we haven't said this already, but you moved into your studio, which is now, is it still over 2 floors that you've got now?
Yep. So 2 floors.
Yeah. And the mechanics of doing it, do you do sort of like this semi-private training 4-to-1 just runs throughout the day, or is it certain times and then you have times that you do 1-to-1 training, or do you have a separate studio for 1-to-1 and for the semi-private? How does that kind of work?
Yeah, it's kind of a nice balance now. We run, I mean, that's what COVID, I think, has given us, which I think it's given a lot of people, is that people are able to get their training in their day now, in their work day, lunchtimes, or even that kind of 9:30, 10:30 slots. So we're as busy at 9:30 and 11:30 as we are at 6 a.m. or 7 p.m, which is great. But yeah, we've actually added another space now. So most times we have 4-to-1 running upstairs, 4-to-1 running downstairs, and then we could have a 1-to-1 happening in the other studio, which is just a couple of doors up from where we are. But in terms of its set out, it's the same. So we have those fold away racks. Mm-hmm. That goes up against the wall. Everybody's got their plates, their bands, all of the equipment they need in their little pod. And yeah, in terms of members, we have 220 members, and they will come and train different times of the day, but it's the same time every week, so that they can kind of prioritize that in their mind. Monday night is my training night, and I have to prioritize that as have to get there, basically.
What happens if they can't make it? Because a lot of my clients are so busy that they need a lot of flexibility. Do they just end up missing a class, or do they have makeup? Do they have classes where they can catch up? Or
yeah, so we go into this saying, we know you're busy, but if we are going to sustain this thing, we have to try and get you to be here as a priority. And what we do have, Paul, is we've got a list of it's about maybe 7-8% of members where they're on our special list, where they need that extra bit of flexibility. So if they work shifts, for example, and they can't do that same time, I've got the fabulous Amy, who's our business PA, and they can go via her to make those changes. And also we've got an app, so they can make the changes themselves on a weekly basis. But the more they change around, the more it impacts other people. And so we're really trying to create something where they will prioritize getting there, and the majority do.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it, to have, for everyone, like you say, for the business and for the individual to kind of have a training is one of those big rocks in the diary that's kind of in there, and they build stuff around. Although things do happen, people get ill or things happen outside. I think if you can make 90% of the sessions that you say you're going to make, and there's just the 10% where there's a little bit of change required or flexibility, then that's a good place to be. Yeah.
Sure.
That's great. So do you still do, I know your introduction into kind of strength and conditioning was through kind of CrossFit. Is that something that you still, with your own training now, is that something that you still do yourself, or have you moved into a slightly different sort of modality of training now yourself?
Yeah, so I've kind of moved. I think I have experienced this whole hormonal, I had IVF with Zayden. So I think my body has shifted into this kind of hormonal state. So it throughout the month and whatever. And I just found that CrossFit, it was just too aggressive for me. I just couldn't recover in the way that I needed to. I couldn't get up and work properly the next day or be a good mom and all that kind of stuff. So so I had to dial it back. I had to do nothing for a while, which was difficult. I also suffer from back pain because I got a bit of scoliosis, and hence the whole imposter syndrome early in the career. Is how the hell am I going to run a fitness business if I can't actually, move or be strong or whatever. So I now do a little bit of powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
I do a little bit of powerlifting, and for a long time I was walking. That was my other kind of way to get out and do some fitness. But I have said yes to doing a marathon in May, so I'm doing Helsinki Marathon in May, and I've just been trying to build up to that in the last. And I'm not a runner, so but I want to prove that we can all do one, maybe, or I can do one, at least for me. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. That's my biggest time commitment, is my marathon training. And I've got
it's interesting the kind of, so are you in your 40s now?
Yeah,
trying to get time. Yeah, because I know. So it's interesting that most of the women that you train are, like you said, 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And most people, and this is not CrossFit bashing at all, so I think it's got it's a great brand, and it does some great things, and it's got a place for a certain tribe and a certain niche of people. But like you say, the kind of people that you train, they're more like you, aren't you? It's like Pete concentrates on training kind of men over 40 mainly, and that's who he is, so it enables you to have more empathy and to know what they're going through, doesn't it? So I think that having that slightly more, and Brett again talked about this, the kind of intuitive approach to training. Like you say, someone might walk into your gym, into the hub one day, and they're a 3 out of 10. Another day they might walk in and be an 8 out of 10. And then the workout or the session can be scaled based upon how they feel. Whereas sometimes if you're in, I don't know, CrossFit does scale as well, but sometimes if you're in that kind of hyper competitive atmosphere, you walk in, you may feel like a 3 out of 10, but everyone around you is kind of pushing 100%, trying to do a massive workout, and you get swept along with it. And that's where kind of injuries happen, and you don't recover properly and all the rest of it. So that's really good. Yeah,
our sessions, just talking about that kind of relatability to the client base, all of our sessions start with breath work and pelvic floor work. So people come in, you're lying down, the lights are off, we want to take the stress down, and then start from there. And that pelvic floor work, I think you had Vicky on, which I'm sure she would have talked a lot about this, and about, that we all have one, right? They're a set of muscles, they're linked directly to breathing. And it just makes so much sense that, we're all responsible for that, be it men or women, that our pelvic floor is the base of our core, and we should be at least have an awareness of, how to move it and activate it, and then involve it in the strength training. Because again, it's one of the other things that, I guess, in the early days of women doing strength training, a lot of women were told not to do it because it's too much pressure on the pelvic floor, but it can be done in the right way. And again, around that kind of scalable level to make it work for people.
And if we can touch on the Reclaiming Yourself podcast, if that's okay, because you have a podcast as well. What is the, if you can kind of explain what like you said, the thinking behind Fitology Hub and how that came to be. What was the thinking behind the Reclaiming Yourself podcast, and how that came to be?
So I don't know about you, but you know, when you work with your clients and you're like, God, you're amazing. You're an incredible human being and you've overcome this and this, and now you're at this point. And when people come in for the consultations, I'm not sure they think or they feel, but we only kind of know about ourselves and our own experiences. Of course, we've talked to kind of other people like friends and family and so on. But anyway, I wanted to share those people's stories. What has happened is Reclaiming itself has become part of the ecosystem of Fitology Hub. You know, a lot of people will be like, oh, there's Instagram, like that messaging. Oh, I'm listening to Reclaiming Yourself. Oh, she's a bit like me. I can actually step in and have a conversation with these people, and then go from there. So it's part of that. Just, I guess, showing or trying to show people that you're not on your own, that, you know, a lot of people, in fact, a larger percentage of society have had a shit time with fitness and sport and gyms and physical activity. And we can change that, and we can provide a space that is very different.
So that's a great sorry, go on, Pete.
I was just going to say, it's a great concept, that, because James talks about this. Me, not so much, because my guys I don't think they actually listen to this podcast, but James's guys do.
It's a prerequisite for people to be a member. They have to. I ask questions every week.
James gets a lot of feedback, and a lot of you've said from the feedback, you know, we've had a lot of like big names on. We've had Dan John and Dave Whitley and Brett Jones and all that sort of stuff. Just name dropping now. Johnny Depp. What episode was that one, James? No, but you know what I mean. But James was saying, like, a lot of the feedback he gets is like when we have what you'd call normal people on, like you know, someone who's just had the journey of, I was out of shape, I was obese, I was in my job, and I thought I need to change my lifestyle, and that's it. That's all that I say. That's all they did. I mean, that's, you know, that's a massive deal. And that gets them, those are the ones that seem to get like great feedback from, like, well, that's because that's me. That is who I'm listening to. So I think that's a great concept for a podcast, of just interview everyday people about their experience, especially introverts and all of that. But that must be a nightmare trying to get there. Because, do you want to come on? It's like, well, not really. But you know, it's I
think because it's pitched as a chat, it's like this, isn't it? Like, an hour flies because you just have let it flow. And I think for people, I think some people are scared, because I've had like people on who've had pretty horrible experiences, and then they're like, but I haven't had a horrible experience, so I can't come on the podcast. I'm like, no, it's not about that. Just get on here and just have a chat with me, and creating that environment. I think that's what Fitology Hub does. It creates that environment where you can come in and go, Jesus, I've had a terrible day or week, and here's a hug, and right, let's get on with it, you know. And just safe space.
So how long have you been doing the podcast for? How many episodes have you done so far? Is it a fairly recent thing, or? So
not anywhere near 150, maybe 15. But I started it in April, and I went into it with the same kind of attitude around it needed to be casual. So I can't release every week because I'm not as consistent as that, but we'll definitely get 1 or 2 out a month. Not even sometimes, maybe 1 out a month. So I started it back in April, and I think we're on maybe episode 15 or so now.
But that's nice though, because like you say, it kind of ties in with Fitology Hub, and I think the phrase you used, it's part of the same ecosystem, you know. So it kind of ties in. You've got the social media, you've got the podcast, you've got the actual hub, the physical location, and everything else, and it kind of helps to build and reinforce that brand, doesn't it? So and add value for, you know, existing members who want to listen as well. So no, I think that's great. Right, I think we'll start to wrap up, if that's okay. I think Paul dropped off, because I dropped off a bit earlier. He'll come back in.
Yeah, Paul's fallen off his horse.
Paul's fallen off his horse. Okay. Dear me. So while we start to wrap up, Pete, is there anything any final thoughts or any questions or anything you've got while we start to wrap up?
Not massive. I'm just having a look through Spotify, actually, because there's 20 episodes on there, I think. So see, don't put yourself down. It's 20 episodes. And I'm gonna have a listen through those actually, because I remember like because we met on an online thing last year, didn't we? And I remember listening to the first one.
Oh, I had
I
done
think
that.
the second one wasn't out yet. You had your first intro. It was like a 2-minute thing, and I listened to that. But then nothing came out for a little while, so it fell off my radar. So I'm going to go back through those actually, because that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Get some. Well, no, it's like I say, it's always good to hear from everyday people just about their experiences, because that's ultimately who we all train. And I mean, I suppose. Well, I was going to say I haven't really got anything to say at the end of this, because we've had a good chat. But just like something as simple as there's a guy who started with me a couple of weeks ago. And he told me he'd had a sore shoulder. I managed to get him with a stick to get from like here to here, and that was a big deal. And he said it was even a bigger deal because it was his good arm. He's left-handed, and he was in a coffee shop or something, and he needed to reach over to his laptop bag, and he reached over with his left arm and picked it up like that, and brought it over, and didn't even think about it, and it didn't hurt. And that was like, he was telling me about like that, like it was the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
Right, Paul's coming back in. He was telling me like that was the best thing in the world. And I was like, and you're saying about people lifting heavy weights and stuff like that. It's like, I mean, you can get to that, but ultimately it's just gaining that confidence in your body, isn't it? So, yeah.
And I don't know about you, but the majority of people that come for consultations there's a barrier, there's an injury, there's a reason they've taken the step finally to get there. And so it's, on unpicking those first really, and going from there.
And especially if you are someone who, you mentioned this, Pete, before, and I mean, if you're someone who's had or lived with pain and discomfort for a long time, and in sort of impaired movement and even psychological lack of confidence, stuff like that, and just to get out of that's truly sort of transformative, isn't it, and life-changing. Like you say, if there was a period where my back was so bad that I couldn't brush my teeth over a sink without having my other hand on the sink to just to support that little lean forwards. And when you can do that for the first time without needing that, or like you said, reach over and take your laptop and it doesn't hurt your shoulder, there's that kind of moment where you think, bloody, that realization of, wow, I just did that and it didn't hurt. Things are getting better. And there's kind of like, there is a more bright future for me. So whatever that looks like for people. And I think working with real everyday people like all four of us do, sometimes it's those really small, getting in and out of the car more easily or more comfortably is life-changing, so
and that's resilience, really, isn't it? We talk about resilience and confidence and all that kind of stuff. Well, what does it mean in real life? And it's that this stuff is gonna come, like it's happening, and every few years we go downhill potentially mentally and physically. And how do we get ourselves kind of ready for that and not beat ourselves up when it happens, and then rebuild? And so, it's
that's fantastic. Paul, we lost you for a second, but you're back with us. We're just wrapping up. Is there any final thoughts or anything you'd like to say?
It's great to hear you're in London. Same here, and it's surprising how few people I'm in Wandsworth. So you're in East London, are you?
Yeah, southeast.
Yeah. So it's it's great, fantastic. I'll have to come and see your studio. Sounds exciting. Sounds like a great setup as well.
Vice versa.
And Suzanne, if people have heard about you for the first time on this podcast and want to find out more about you or Fitology Hub, or have a listen to the Reclaiming Yourself podcast, what's kind of the best way for people to do that? What's your kind of preferred medium that you use?
So I guess Instagram is the place where we target all of our main work, and then that gets filtered out into elsewhere. But Instagram will take you to the website, or vice versa is probably the best place in terms of Fitology Hub and the business and the podcast and so on. It's all on there. And then my own personal Instagram account is Suzanne Keatley 22. So I'm on Instagram. Try and do a little bit on there just to keep up with everybody else.
I've just given you a follow.
Fitology Instagram?
Yeah. Fitology Hub is actually just Fitology Hub, all one word.
That's
right.
Fitology Hub. Yeah.
And the same with the website, fitologyhub.com.
Easy, isn't it?
Easy.
Keep it simple.
Easy. Good. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really lovely to talk to you. I'm actually having a catch up. I'm meeting with Chet tomorrow afternoon.
Lovely.
So yeah, that'll be really nice. I'll have a chat with him, and I'll say that we had you on today, which is great. No, thank you so much. It's been lovely. Lovely getting to know you, and yeah, you're not far away. Like, I'm only in Essex, so I've got to pop into London and see Paul's new studio as well. So I'll have to try and do a bit of a tour one day and come up to London and try and meet a few people.
Like on the buses.
On the buses, yeah, on the buses, yeah. That's an old reference, steering me.
Keep things up to date.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. That's been episode 135 of the Health Oddity podcast. We will be back next week. Please do like, share, subscribe. If you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please do so. If you'd like to join the Facebook group, just go into Facebook on groups and type in Health Oddity, and one of us will let you in. We will be back next week. I'm not sure if we have a guest lined up yet. We have potentially. We will be back, though, the three of us, hopefully, and we will see you then. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.